Right. Thank you, Stephen. Welcome to the Executive Scrutiny Board meeting for August. I'm just trying to get some revised paperwork because they don't flow too well, as I think you'll see if you scrutinise the backs of items 7, 8, 9 and 10. So just bear with us whilst Alex sorts those out. Any apologies? I've got Councillor Prosser. Any other apologies, please?
Apologies from Councillor Grimmadell, and Councillor Cooper's running about 5 minutes late.
Okay, thank you very much. Anybody else? No? Okay, thank you. I've got no late items, got no receipt of petitions, identification of urgent items in which call-in will not apply. I've got none of those. Declarations of interest. No? Okay. Item 6, minutes of the meeting held on the 14th of July. You'll have all had copies of that. Any issues or problems with those minutes at all? Okay. That's the minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of July. Yeah, they're attached. Number 5, the forward plan. You've also had copies of that. Council Cabinet responses to scrutiny recommendations, that's also attached on item 6. Yep. Okay, could I have a seconder, please?
Giles wanted to speak on the minutes. I can speak on the minutes? Just a quick one, really. So on the notes from the topic review, early intervention, youth outreach, support engagement draft report, it says obviously the Exec Scrutiny Board resolved to note the report, which was what we did. I asked for a vote at the time and we didn't have one, and I know that in the cabinet meeting you said that you had you'd made a wrong assumption about it and that you couldn't speak with all the exec because we didn't take a vote on it. I'm not interested in assigning blame or anything along those lines, but what are we going to do to make sure that on ones that should have had a vote and not been noted, we won't just note them again?
If you want to vote on them, propose them, get a seconder, and then if there's a majority in favour, we'll vote on them. It's quite simple. Okay. Interested in operating the hall and golf course in an integrated manner, or the golf course as a separate entity. So that will be, I guess, for tomorrow night for Cabinet to actually debate. Lucy.
Chair, there's obviously an opportunity here for us as the Scrutiny Board to make a comment on that motion. I unfortunately wasn't at the somewhat reduced full council meeting in July. And I haven't listened to the debate online. But if there were points raised in that debate that we think would be worth highlighting to the Cabinet, then we could have an opportunity to do that now. Or if there are other points that we feel ought to be highlighted, maybe the links between this and our active policy, active people policy, I think we call it, then again, that is something that we could highlight from this meeting.
I welcome the opportunity for members here on the Executive Scrutiny to do exactly that. So, I don't know, have you got something in mind, Lucy, that you want to comment on or recommend?
As I say, I wasn't at the full council meeting, but others who were might want to highlight points. Or if there are other points that people feel are pertinent to this, maybe from a particularly Alistair perspective. Or
okay. I'll give other members who were at that meeting who voted on that motion, which was passed by the full council, to make comments before I make my own. I don't know if anybody wishes to comment. I mean, certainly from my point of view as Chair of Executive Scrutiny, the democratic will of the council was that we now do talk to interested parties who are interested in taking over the running of Alistair Golf Course in particular, because in terms of being open and transparent, the councillors at the full council meeting who voted for that motion, as I felt, that is the best way and the right way forward. It is now, I think, beholden on Cabinet to uphold the will of the council and do exactly that, to talk to those interested parties, see if they're realistic and viable, and then to proceed accordingly. Not to do so, I think, would fly in the face of the democratic decision of this council. But that's only my point of view from a democratic position. Other councillors may want to make comment now, or they may wish to simply leave it to Cabinet tomorrow evening. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I think most of what you said I agree with, and most of the issues were pretty thoroughly debated at the actual council meeting, and I agree with you, it's now up to Cabinet to do the right thing and go with the democratic will of the council.
Thank you. Hardiel.
Yeah, I mean, I'd support that. A council motion was passed, and we really need to see what the council cabinet are going to do in response to that. And I think we should be putting a recommendation to see we get that information back about what are the actions and the responses of the council cabinet to this motion which has been passed at full council for them to act on. And I think we need to get something back here for us to decide whether the will of the council has been delivered or not.
Okay, I don't put words in your mouth, Councillor Dinser, but if you can sort of ping a recommendation to Stephen along those lines that you wish that Council now commits to following the will of the Council with the motion, opens negotiation with these outside interested parties and reports back to executive scrutiny. Would you like to write something to that effect?
Yeah, I mean, I think if I say what I'm saying, I'm sure Stephen can. I won't make it too complicated, Stephen. Is to say, I don't know if you captured it already, but
you're proposing that the Executive Scrutiny Board is resolving to recommend to Council Cabinet that it commits to the will of Council in relation to this motion that was passed.
And that we should then get a report back in terms of what has happened so that we can actually comment on that as a scrutiny process.
I'm happy to second that as well. Is it okay with that, Steve?
Yes, thanks, Chair.
Lucy.
The other thing that might be pertinent to this discussion was the answer that was given by Councillor Ralston to yourself, Chair, about the running of Alistair Golf Course at that same meeting, where she said quite clearly that she didn't think there was any need to continue to run the golf course. Now that is somewhat opposite to the tenor of the motion that went to Council, and it might be that we would specifically like some comment to resolve those 2 points. Because what Councillor Ralston said was that your question, Chair, just remind you, is will the Council, even at this 11th hour, consider an outside organisation taking over and running Alistair Golf Course? To which she said, sorry, but no. The Council ran a consultation and sought expressions of interest for the future running of the course in 2020. That process was due to finish on that date. No viable or process-compliant officers were received. The Council has now made the decision to stop running the golf course. The club closed at the end of the year. The full use of the parkland is now open to the public to use. So what was debated was at odds with the Cabinet's current view on that.
I think I understand what you're actually saying, Lisa, but with all due respect, I mean, that is just one cabinet member's opinion. The will of the council was stated quite clearly in the motion. As Councillor Hardiel said, I think it's now the ball is firmly in the cabinet's court to fulfil the will of the council and do exactly what we asked, irrespective of those comments. I think otherwise we can make it more complicated than it is. I think. Sorry. Okay, but thanks anyway, Lucy.
Thank you, Chair. I understand the motion that was passed at full council. I get why it's easy to make noise when it's arguably too late. But I think we set an almost dangerous precedent at this point if we renege on what's already been said. We're at a point where we know that there's somebody interested in Allestree Hall. If we now just go back on that, what precedent are we setting for anyone else that's ever interested in buying something again? We discussed, as we said at full council, we discussed this idea that there was a business proposal put forward somewhere that all these interested parties and organisations, and I use the plural because plural was used, organisations, were coming out the woodwork to take it on. But where are they? Where are all these business cases? Where are they in the meeting now? 252 words is not a business proposal, as we said at the time. So I understand why this is in front of us. I get if the circumstances were different, maybe this would be the right thing to do, and again, I get that the motion was passed, but I do think we are risking setting a rather dangerous precedent at this point.
With all due respect, Council, that's your opinion. The will of the Council was quite clearly stated. Also, I don't think Ian Woosman's organisation will take very kindly to your term, crawling out of the woodwork. It's such a disparaging term. I don't think that's a very fair or reasonable comment to make about such an esteemed organisation.
If it's disparaging, Chair...
sorry, I'll invite you back in when I'm ready to. Thank you. Okay.
If it's... oh, sorry. No.
Chair, you mentioned Mr Woosnam's organisation. I believe it's run by a different company to Mr Woosnam. I understand his name's linked with it. You seem very clued up on this. Has the Ian Woosnam golf organisation made any offers of interest, or is it was it just purely from a 252-word email to a number of council cabinet members?
I'm glad you ended on that note. It's quite interesting. It's your cabinet members that his organisation spoke to. But the irony is that apparently your cabinet members who Ian Woosman's organisation spoke to never thought to mention it, allegedly, to the cabinet member or to any of the officers. The other members of this council found that absolutely amazing, that you never passed on that information. And these outside organisations can't believe that the city council would operate in such a way. So... anyway, I think we can talk about.
Chair, I think you're in real close situation here of misleading this chamber. I've asked a question. You're talking at a degree of authority.
Councillor, please.
Chair, you said the crawling out the woodwork comment was disparaging. Just to clarify anything on that, no absolute disrespect or anything meant to Ian Woosnam or his academy. My point is that it's come at a late hour, arguably past the hour, but again, no disrespect to Ian Woosnam or anything associated with him or anyone else.
It's just a shame, as I said, that your fellow colleagues didn't pass that information on to the cabinet member and officers.
Thank you. I mean, I think everybody's got a view on this, and everybody had a view in the full council meeting who was there because of the pandemic arrangements we made for ourselves. We're in danger of rehearsing what was discussed and debated at full council. We don't need to do that anymore. The resolution was passed by full council. What we need is a response from cabinet in the way that we've had a resolution passed to do that. So debating it here again after debating it at full council is not going to add anything more to where we are. We just need to see what the response of the council cabinet is to the will of the council.
I think you're absolutely right, Councillor. We're in danger of going in circles about something we have no power over, and we're trying to preempt a discussion that will take place tomorrow night by Cabinet. It's now up to Cabinet to fulfil the will of the Council, which was quite clearly stated last week. So let's move back to the agenda.
Chair, can I just, please, if I may, it was proposed that the Executive Scrutiny Board is resolving to It's resolving to recommend to Council Cabinet that it commits to the will of the Council motion. I think I was proposed and seconded, but I think we need to go for a vote if it's not unanimous in amongst all the...
Okay, I'll second it.
Sorry?
No, if you want to speak, just indicate and I'll take it.
Thank you, Chair. So, as I said earlier, before I was cut off, I think you're in danger of potentially misleading this chamber. I asked you a question. Are you aware of a firm business case being put to this council? You decided to personally attack me. However, we've got a number of council senior officers here who may have knowledge of that. Perhaps we could ask them, has there been a firm business case that would meet any recognised standard of one? And we can clear that up. Thank you.
As I said earlier, Rob, I don't think it's going to be useful for executive scrutiny to be going round this in circles. This is now up to Cabinet tomorrow night to debate, to ask these questions if it thinks fit. I don't know if I don't really particularly want to put officers on the spot on this one, but okay. Rachel, would you like to comment on this?
I have had no information or detail about a business plan linked to the Ian Woosnam Academy. No, I've not seen anything of that nature.
Because the information wasn't passed on from councillors, presumably.
So just to clear up, so you are potentially misleading this committee, Chair?
Rob, please do not keep interjecting. That's not the way meetings are conducted in this council.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was in the meeting. I'll be quite brief because we don't want to go over it all again. It is late in the hour. I do understand that. But the will of this council was to go back and put it back on the table. Now, if that doesn't happen tomorrow night, then I would consider that to be anti-democratic. And let's just wait and see. Thank you.
And the people of Derby will as well, I think. Okay. On that note...
Chair, just so we can be clear, please. So it's been proposed and seconded to the recommendation to Council Cabinet to recognise the rule of the Council motion. Is that unanimous in this room, or do we need to go to a vote on that?
Go to a vote.
Those in favour, please show.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 6 in favour, Chair.
Those against, please show.
4 against. And might I suggest, Chair, that as far as Council Cabinet's response to this motion, we have got a standing item on the exec scrutiny agenda which covers Council Cabinet's responses to the recommendations from exec scrutiny. So Councillor Dinser mentioned getting a response back. Well, that will be on the next agenda because we'll have the minutes of the Cabinet meeting. So when we get to that item, we can look at it then. That's what I propose.
Thank you very much. Can I ask if you can hand the papers out, please, Stephen? Where we've got the... did you bring them in, Alex? Where's Alex?
Chair, I think all the members here will be looking at theirs separately as separate items on their laptops.
Okay, that's fine then. Right, what we'll do at this stage, if that's okay, we've dealt with item 7 and 8 on the Cabinet agenda. I'm going to move back, if we can, now that Alex has rejoined us, to our own agenda, and that's item 7, performance plan, before I then move us back to the Cabinet agenda, which will be item 9. Okay, Alex, over to you, please. Performance plan.
Thank you, Chair. I'm presenting this report this evening on behalf of Sarah Walker, who's, as you'll know, is the Head of Strategy and Performance, who's on annual leave this week. But councillors recall that prior to the pandemic, the Executive Scrutiny Board would maintain a performance forward plan, which highlighted key performance issues to overview and scrutiny members. Sarah and I met with the Chair of the Exec Scrutiny Board last month with a view to restarting this process and better coordinating the work of the Executive Scrutiny Board and the 5 Scrutiny Review Boards in relation to performance. The report's hopefully fairly self-explanatory, but it recommends that a performance forward plan is reintroduced based on those areas of good practice or underperformance highlighted as part of the Cabinet's quarterly performance reports, which are also routinely considered by this board as part of its scrutiny of the Cabinet agenda. It's envisaged that if the recommendations are accepted this evening, that this board will either undertake or recommend that scrutiny review boards undertake performance surgeries based on the areas of greatest concern. This will allow members the opportunity to examine issues in greater detail outside the business of the monthly Executive Scrutiny Board meetings, which are often dominated by scrutiny of the following evening's Cabinet agenda. It's also recommended that the Chair of the Executive Scrutiny Board, supported by colleagues from Policy and Insight and Democratic Services, meets with the chairs of the 5 respective scrutiny review boards twice per year. These meetings will take place privately, but they're intended to coordinate the work programmes and avoid unnecessary duplication across the different scrutiny boards. As I mentioned, as officers, we're conscious that much of the focus of this meeting is driven by scrutiny of the Cabinet agenda, but this report seeks to re-establish oversight of corporate performance as a key element of this board's remit. And of course, if during the scrutiny of the Cabinet agenda, the Executive Scrutiny Board encounters issues which require greater scrutiny, members are encouraged to refer matters to the relevant scrutiny review boards for further and more in-depth investigation, who can in turn report back to this board in due course. The next quarterly performance report is due to be considered by Cabinet next month, at which point the board will receive further recommendations on items to include in the performance forward plan. So that will start to take shape from the next meeting, and we'll start to receive performance items at this board and also recommendations for performance surgeries to take place outside of the scheduled meetings. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you, Alex. Any comments, observations at all? Lucy.
Thank you, Chair. I'm mindful that not all councillors are members of a scrutiny board, and people may have interests and points that they want to raise in an area that they may not be a member of. So I just wondered if prior to these 6 monthly meetings, when the programme is going to be reviewed, do you think it might be useful for all members to be emailed and a couple of so weeks beforehand, and asked if they have any particular issues that they think should be brought into the process. And then they could be gone through that process as part of that agenda.
Alex, what's your view?
That's absolutely not a problem. Happy to feed that into the Scrutiny Review Board chairs.
Yeah, okay. Any more comments at all from members? Anybody like to speak? No? Okay. Thank you very much for that, Alex. Okay, so we have the recommendation. Are we in favour of the recommendation 2.1 and 2.2?
With that slight amendment to the process, Chair.
With a slight amendment which Alex has taken on board. Are we okay? Or anybody who's not happy with those recommendations? Nobody's indicating that they're not happy with it, so take that as affirmative. Okay, thank you very much. Moving back now to the Cabinet agenda, we just dealt with item 8 on that. Moving on to item 9, which is the financing of the Public Protection Officers team. This is the Communities Scrutiny Review Board minute extract. Are there any comments, observations? Lucy.
I thought this was an interesting overview that they've had, and I would welcome it. So I think, Chair, if others are happy to support welcoming it and providing feedback to the other board would be helpful. Two things that I thought following on from that is, one, there's talk about Rainsway and a review of that, and I think to go into more detail specifically about Rainsway, either with an report from officers on that, which they don't actually seem to be, I don't think it was on their recommendations, but I thought it would be useful. But secondly, there was reference to the advantage of leaving fly tipping around, and that there's an experiment going on with a number of strands, I think, to see whether identifying fly tipping and getting people to be aware that it's not the right thing to do. And I think it would be useful to have some further feedback on that aspect as well. And that's not specifically requested as part of the report. And I wondered whether we could add that as a request for them to also look into the results of that work.
Okay. Who in terms of officers would like to answer that? Rachel, over to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, on that particular point, that would be, I think, a very sensible thing to do, to ask for a further report on the detail of the implications of that and the approach around fly tipping, so I very support that.
Thank you, Rachel. That's most helpful. Are you okay with that, Lucy? Rachel's taking that on board.
So, could I just clarify whether that will come back to us or to the board it's come from, or what mechanism?
I'm assuming that will be a report back to the Community Scrutiny Review Board for them to consider.
Okay. Yeah, I'll go back to the Scrutiny Review Board. Okay.
I was just
Hardiel?
going to...
You can ask that. Yeah, okay. That's been answered for you. Okay. Any more comments, observations, concerns from anybody? Okay. Thank you. Moving on to item 10 on the agenda, which is delegation of authority to approve affordable housing schemes. Rachel, can you want to talk us through this, please?
Yeah, I think my colleague Karen Bree is going to do that. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you.
This report actually proposes to delegate authority to approve affordable housing schemes so that we can actually act quicker to market conditions and rather than keep on coming back to Cabinet. We propose that the delegation is to the Strategic Director of Communities in Place in consultation with the Strategic Director of Corporate Resources, Section 151 Officer and Cabinet Member for Adults, Health and Housing. The delegation would be for a total cost of 2.5 million for each new affordable acquisition, as long as it can be contained within the existing HRA capital programme, which is submitted. So the reason is we're hoping that by doing this, we can actually, as I say, act more quickly, that when opportunities do arise, we can swiftly move on them and they're not subject to other people in the market that do actually are actually able to move quicker than us at times, where we actually have to go through a quite extensive report and cabinet approval process. We are using the HRA capital programme along with ring-fence right to buy receipts. And we work with the housing options to make sure that the schemes do meet the housing need within the city. The current delegations are that the Head of Estates and Property Review, they can approve up to 100,000, the Cabinet member would approve up to 250, and then above that we would actually have to go to Cabinet. I'm sure that everyone can appreciate that when you are doing larger developments, or doing slightly larger purchases, then a lot of the things that we are doing are actually above the 250,000. So we would like to have the delegation. The current capital programme indicates that we can actually deliver up to 500 additional affordable homes. And we feel that it would expedite it if we can have this delegation put into place. We do propose that it's for an initial 12-month period, after which we will review and then we will look to report back and see about whether it is feasible to extend.
Thank you very much for that. Any comments or observations?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think this is an excellent scheme. We've been constrained by this requirement for everything to go through registered providers in the past, and Derby Homes are doing a good job, in my view, in providing more affordable housing, and this will give them an opportunity to expand that. I'm particularly taken by the paragraph that says ward councillors will be briefed on any acquisition within their wards. I think this is to be recommended, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah. Rob?
Thank you, Chair. Just on the back of what Councillor Carr said, I'm in agreement with that, that ward councillors will be consulted as well. That's excellent news. And also as well, with the old premise of this is, the housing market is moving at such a pace. Anyone who who's buying a house at the minute or selling one knows, I mean, we were looking recently and we were going for viewings and they were gone pretty much as soon as we were going to them. So it's moving really fast. And £2.5 million sounds quite a lot of money, but in the grand scheme of things, we want to provide social housing for the people of Derby. It's really important to get people housed in good accommodation. So on the back of what Councillor Carr said, could you just update the committee about what oversight would there be at cabinet level? I do know it's mentioned in the papers a little bit, but could you just give a little bit more detail into what consultation the cabinet member will be given for anything that you guys see or want to procure for the city, and how regular that would be?
We have our briefings with our cabinet member, so it's proposed that each time we are looking at doing something, that we would actually, he would be briefed at the meetings. We will also still run the same appraisals that we currently run that would be included within cabinet reports. So the information is still there, so we're still working within the same parameters. We have regular meetings with the cabinet member, and we can actually produce reports and lists of what we are proposing to deliver through this delegation process.
Thank you very much. Lucy.
Thank you. And I was talking to an estate agent by chance who lives around the corner from me this morning, and he was saying that the current market conditions have just changed. Since we've had the change in stamp duties, suddenly he says the market has gone completely flat. Nobody's buying anything. So things can switch quite quickly in some occasions. But I was wondering whether there's a useful paragraph related to this, looking at the climate change implications, and I'm imagining that not all the properties to be purchased will be new properties built to current standards. And I wondered where when we are purchasing an older property, maybe a larger property, for example, and it doesn't meet current standards, whether the work that would be needed to bring that up to at least current energy efficiency standards would be paid for also as part of the 2.5 million, or whether that will come out of a different budget with a different approval process.
Thank you, Lucy. Any more comment? Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I was going to say, did Councillor Kerr want me to respond? We do actually include within our appraisal the costs for actually any refurbishment works and upgrading works that are required. We take it on a property by property basis. If it is a open acquisition, we look at the current EPC rating, and we always target a minimum of uprating it to a EPC of C. So we include all of those works within our costs.
Thank you very much. Do you want to come in? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I do have concerns with this, really relating to the amount. It's going up tenfold if it was 250,000 or more to 2.5 million. And delegation of authorities, I do have concerns about that. I mean, that's why we ended up with the brown bin contract going over to somewhere away from Ashbourne, Crewway, I believe, because of delegation of authority. I believe as councillors we have a responsibility and a duty to scrutinise and look at things. I'm not saying the rates shouldn't rise a little, but really we don't want to stampede through with something and then further down the line, lessons learned. To me, if necessary, people should be informed, and if necessary, if they need to make an acquisition quick, then there should be an extraordinary meeting held, of which I'm sure we could have a quorum and push it through anyway.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do any other members of the executive want to comment on that particular comment, or any other aspects of the scheme at all? Do you want to comment? Yeah. Sure.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose a couple of comments here. Firstly, members have a role as council in improving the capital programme, which would create the HRA permissions for this, and I think a lot of members will also realise that we have an obligation to spend right to buy within a particular frequency, otherwise we have to pass that back to governments. So the overall control is in members approving the capital programme and any necessary borrowing attached to that. I just want members to consider, there's recommendation 2.14 which is review the delegated authority after 12 months, but recommendation 2.1 says for a period of 12 months. So if you read that literally, it could be that at the end of 12 months, on the 365 days, if we were in the process of acquisition or whatever, that the delegation is then not there to see that through. So maybe I'd suggest, just in terms of a governance around this, is that you ask for a report after 12 months, but you don't end the delegation after 12 months, because that could create a cliff edge where we will not be able to follow this through in the delegation. I just raised that for members' consideration.
Thank you very much. Lucy, and then Alison.
I was actually quite pleased that there was a hard cut-off. In my first reading of this, I jotted down a number of points about whether it was just for this year, whether it's each year, whether it's rolling, and then I reread it and realised that yes, there is a hard cut-off. I think that possibly what is wrong is that the review needs to be slightly before the end of the cut-off date. So maybe the review needs to be after 10 months so that it can be followed on, if that's what Cabinet feel is right. Or else it needs to be for 14 months at the beginning, and maybe that needs to be a recommendation that we put to Cabinet.
I'll leave you to ponder on that, Lucy, whilst I bring Alison in. Alison.
Thank you. I'm inclined to agree with Councillor Kerr that, rather than have this hard cut-off point or a review, that it would in effect mean an extension beyond 12 months, that you just, it is reviewed after 10 months so that, that it can be decided in advance of the 12 months. I tend to also share, I think is it Councillor Evans with respect, thank you, a little bit of scepticism about delegated authorities, although of course, like probably everybody else in the room and perhaps more than some, I definitely want to see more social housing provision in the city, but of course I do know that Derby Homes is the main builder of effective social housing and affordable housing in the city. So I don't want Derby Homes' focus to move away from being a builder of houses to being a purchaser of houses. And I'm sure that isn't the intention here, but it is a factor that needs to be borne in mind, because in my own view, the system we currently have for requiring private developers to develop social housing is ineffective, and we need to return most social housing provision to social housing providers, not surprisingly, because they tend to do it better and well, and then not as subject to the whims of the market as private developers. So, sorry, I think I'm going off the point, bear with me. Because I think I'm going off the point partly because, in a sense, I understand the urgency here. On the other hand, I am very sceptical about this tenfold increase, as has been pointed out. So I'm pretty inclined to perhaps abstain on this at the moment, unless there's an officer in the room can provide a compelling reason of why the amount has had to go up tenfold in one fell swoop. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison. Yeah, I'm picking up some concerns about the delegation and the amounts involved. So I guess that Lucy is possibly working on a recommendation at the present time. So we have a few. Alex, you want to come in?
Chair, I could perhaps offer some constitutional insight onto the basis of this report. Councillors who've been paying close attention to Councillor Webb's portfolio over the last sort of 18 months will have noticed a very high volume of individual cabinet member meetings for Councillor Webb, where individual property transactions are being brought to those meetings. And because of the statutory requirement to give 5 clear days notice of the meeting to be held in public, that doesn't always work well with the fast-paced nature of the housing market and the decisions that are needed. This delegation seeks to remove some of that inefficiency, I suppose, and obviously with the cabinet member meetings, opposition councillors have an entitlement to attend those meetings, So included within the report is this review period after 12 months to see how the delegation is operating, and also the requirement to ensure that ward councillors who are affected by transactions within their ward are consulted and informed on any purchases. So in many ways it's a response to a very high volume of meetings that were being scheduled for Councillor Webb's portfolio to approve individual property transactions that fell below the £250,000 key decision threshold that we required at Cabinet. And the 2.5 million figure, I believe, is for the total sum of transactions over the course of the year, rather than for any individual transaction, if that makes sense. But other colleagues may be able to shed more light on that.
Right. Okay. Rachel and then Hardiel.
Thank you, Chair. So I was just going to give some explanation around the perception of a tenfold increase and what has changed in that period of time to require that. And the key sort of change here has been the lifting of the cap on the housing revenue account that took place in 1819. Government changed the rules, which allowed us to use the HRA in a much more flexible and more effective way. And that has increased our ability to really turbocharge our acquisition and development of new affordable homes. So that has been partly what's caused this level of lots of reports coming through both the system to Cabinet and to Cabinet member, because we are trying to do our absolute best to meet that 500 units a year to try and maximise our social housing stock. But that was the change that took place in 1819 that had that impact, and therefore that's why we brought this report to you. Thank you, Chair.
Hardiel.
Yeah, I mean, I think I do have sympathy with the concerns raised by Councillor Evans and Councillor Martin on this. Maybe, but I think there's also the opportunity for flexibility and sort of trying to seize, if the market is still as active as it states it is, or it may not be anymore, to sort of seize the moment and acquire properties. But it might be best then for us to recommend that we get quarterly updates on activity that happens in a year, so that we can sort of have an idea on what is happening, and if we think there's something awry, we can actually raise those questions with the executive. And whilst the process described in this paper is allowed to be tested for the 12 or 14 months as suggested by Councillor Carey.
Yeah, I think what you're suggesting, Councillor Dinsey, is possibly a good way forward. It offers some reassurance, and yet it doesn't stymie the efforts or the reason behind those efforts, because I think we understand those. Would members be okay with that? I mean, because I think that might be more straightforward. I'm not sure what you're going to recommend, Lucy, but I think what Hardy was suggesting would be a halfway house, which would allow it to go ahead. We get quarterly reports back, and if there were, and I'm sure there won't be any abusers or things that raise our concerns, but at least there's that reassurance that we have sight of it every 3 months. And if there are concerns, then we can stop it in its tracks. I'm sure there won't be, or let's say I hope there won't be, but at least it offers that reassurance. I think that might be the way forward. Alison.
Sorry, Martin, I just had an urgent message there, so I have to confess that I didn't quite follow everything that Hardiel was saying. So could you just clarify me what you're proposing, please? Sorry.
Yeah, what Hardiel was suggesting was that as a halfway house, to offer reassurance, was have quarterly feedbacks in terms of the activity that's actually occurred, and then we'll be able to monitor that, and we'll come back to this committee. And if there were abuses, which I'm sure there won't be in people's eyes, I'm sure, and I hope there won't be, but we would have the opportunity then to stop it in its tracks if we wanted to. But I think it just offers that degree of opportunity without sort of slowing the process down. So I think, if you want to
I'm
propose
happy to propose that, Chair.
Yep.
Chair,
Lucy.
Going back to the first point, what I've drafted is to say that Cabinet consider requesting the report on the uplift in delegation level to come to Cabinet 2 months before the approval for the higher spending limit ends, to enable the higher level of delegation to continue uninterrupted if that is what Cabinet decides. We can add in after that, or for Cabinet to reduce it to an intermediate level as exec scrutiny would prefer. And we can also add that during the trial period, exec scrutiny would expect quarterly reports to come to Cabinet.
Could I have your opinion on that, Rachel? I'll put you on the spot on that. So what Lucy's suggesting?
I think that's quite acceptable.
Is that okay? Yeah, you have no major concern. Okay, not that we would necessarily not go for the recommendations if officers didn't agree, but I was curious. Do you want to put that forward then, or can you send that to... Send it to Stephen, and we want to encapsulate the quarterly review as part of that. Over to you, Stephen.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'm just checking so I've got the addition here of the, because of course if the quarterly reports go to Cabinet, then of course they're going to come here first, so that covers the point you were interested in there. So just need to decide whether we need to go to a vote on this now, whether it needs to...
Is any member here not happy with what's being proposed?
Chair, the point that I'm not sure about is the bit to say, do we want to reduce it to an intermediate level? As a number of people have said that. So after the 12-month period, would we prefer?
You're asking questions of your own recommendations, Lucy.
Would we, as a group, prefer Cabinet to reduce it to an intermediate level?
Hardiel.
Chair, I mean, we can't predict.
No.
It's a pilot, and the report is about testing a new way of doing things and make ourselves, the council's decision-making a bit more nimble and sort of responsive to the needs of the market.
Yeah.
Let's see what comes back, and then we can deliberate whether we think we want to support it going forward or not.
I think you're right. I think we've got a way forward. I think what was being suggested, I think, is the right way forward. And I'm getting nods.
I was just going to say, I agree with that.
Okay, I think I'd like to move to that. If you can read that to me, please, Stephen.
Will do,
I'll ask
Chair.
him to read it. Come.
Right. The Executive Scrutiny Board resolved to recommend to Council Cabinet that it considers requesting the report on the uplift in delegation level to come to Cabinet 2 months before the approval for higher spending limits ends to enable the higher level of delegation to continue uninterrupted. If that is what Cabinet decides, and with the addition of, and that during the trial period, Executive Scrutiny Board would expect quarterly reports to come to Cabinet.
Thank you, Stephen. Is anybody that disagrees? No, nobody disagrees, or nobody's indicated they disagree, so we're fine. Thank you very much. Thank you for that. Moving on to item 11, food safety. Who's taking us through that, please? Sorry? Oh, sorry. Hi.
Hello, Chair. Yes.
Thank you, Doug.
Yeah. This, let me get the microphone right. Okay. The report that we put forward seeks the approval to adopt the 21-22 food safety, food standards, animal health and safety plans. We're required as a local authority to produce these plans annually. There wasn't a plan produced last year because of COVID, and they follow a template produced by the regulating authorities, which is the Food Standards Agency and the Health and Safety Executive. So in terms of the plan itself, it seeks out how we will regulate and inspect businesses, and for this year, Food Standards Agency have mitigated our normal inspection requirements due to COVID, and they've given the authority some priority areas in which it will hopefully meet this financial year. The other aspects, just to think in respect of the plan, both the food standards, food safety and trading standards teams have both heavily been involved with COVID over the last 12 months in pretty much every aspect, and the report does recognise the fact that it is going to take us some time to get back to pre-COVID levels in terms of inspection activity within those areas. So in moving forward, the only other aspect to raise scrutiny is that the report also looks to delegate the responsibility to the Director of Public Protection and Street Pride for in-year changes on the basis in case we have to stand up the team again regarding COVID outbreaks and to support our colleagues in public health. This will obviously be done in consultation with the Cabinet member. And that's it, Chair.
Thank you very much, Doug. Any comments, observations from members at all? Lucy.
I'll just say that I think it's a very pragmatic way forward, and I'm really pleased that the government, through, I forgot what the agency's called, has actually taken this pragmatic approach, because it could be really challenging otherwise.
Thank you, Lucy. If there's no more comments, then I'll thank you, Doug, for that. And we'll move on to the last item on the agenda, item 12, the compliance with contract and financial procedures rules. Simon, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. There's a number of items on here tonight. There's, first of all, D2N2 Growth and Innovation Programme, or Programme 3, GIP 3, which requires us to consider how we can use this initiative to help create jobs, help create growth and innovation in this particular area, and it's asking for a capital match funding of 265,000 from the Derby Enterprise Growth Fund. This is an important area for our recovery and our economic presence, and it's recommended here that obviously Cabinet support it. Another area on here is about local authority delivery phase 3, LAD 3 as it's called. I don't come up with the titles, but this is about local authority delivery phase 3 for sustainable warmth, and this is about where we are looking at a series of interventions and a bid for up to 2.5 million, which would happen in 22-23, in order that we can bring up and improve energy efficiency of low-income households with energy performance rating of D, E, F and G. And that's, as we heard earlier, is important, is that we have to support our private renter sector as well in trying to contribute to our climate challenge, and also we know that warm homes help with the public health agenda as well. And then the final item on here is in respect of Public Health Delegated Authority, which talks about the tendering and managing of external grant awards, and this is seeking a series of delegated authorities to award what is said in 4.2.3 for local enhanced services, care testing, and also the contain outbreak management funding and section 31 funding. So Chair, it's a fairly standard report about permissions to either bid, receive or execute money that we get, in order that, as we've said earlier, we can remain agile and provide the maximum outcome for the city. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Simon. Any members wish to comment, make observations? Lucy?
Thank you. Two things I wanted to comment on. Firstly, the D2N2 GIP thing. I just wondered how it was publicised, because as I understand it, it's covering both the Derby and Derbyshire area, and therefore we need to be publicising that to our businesses to make sure that they are aware, and a higher proportion than would otherwise go doesn't end up with the county. Not that the county doesn't deserve it, but we would hope that our businesses are wanting to innovate. So I just wondered how the publicity is working on that, and maybe what we as members could be doing to publicise it as well, because hopefully a lot of the people who have the businesses are actually living in Derby as well. The second thing regarding the local authority delivery of the housing improvement grants, I'm just slightly concerned that we're targeting homes that used to be council owned, and I can see the logic to doing that because it makes it easier to do homes of a given type. But we're also, specifically I understand here, supposed to be targeting people on low incomes. Now, we're specifically targeting people here who have sufficient income to have purchased that property. And I just wonder whether we're actually going to meet the government's requirements if we're not targeting people who are known to be on low incomes, rather than targeting people who live in a particular sort of property. And I just want to know a bit more about that, because I don't want us to miss out on the opportunity to get this funding, because even this funding is only going to do a few hundred houses, and we have tens of thousands that we need to treat. So if we miss out on anything that we could get, it's an opportunity lost. So can we just square that circle as to whether going for properties that we used to own is actually the right way forward, or whether we should be working more proactively now with other affordable housing providers to target people who are in that affordable rented sector, but who have got properties that are maybe solid-walled because they're older properties as well.
Thank you. Can you square Lucy's circle for her, please?
I think just if I can pick up the first one, and then Rachel might pick up the LIP funding. It's fair to say that on a lot of the D2N2 growth initiatives, publicity and awareness is sometimes not as widely known as possible, but the council works very closely with the Chamber of Commerce. Members will know that the Derby Enterprise Growth Fund works across the city and the surrounding travel to work area for Derby. And the fact that this is using the money from that pot is, I think, increasing the awareness of the accessibility of this particular programme in promoting it. But it is fair to say that there is such a myriad of business support and business support programs, often with very similar names, that I think businesses do get confused, and that's partly why in our economic recovery plan we have invested in this area to not only provide support to growth industries, but also develop relationships with core supply or core businesses and SMEs and everything else, to try and make sure that our businesses can maximise the external support available. And now I'll hand over to Rachel.
Thank you, Simon. Okay, any more comments or questions? Lucy, I can see you're about to come back in.
Sorry, I thought Rachel was going to come back on the housing question.
Oh, Rachel, yes, sorry, Rachel.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, clearly the funding is obviously through BIS in the government, and there are some caveats around how that is targeted, but clearly if we can do anything we can to make sure that those eligible properties, but also those on low income, both those things are taken into account in trying to target this funding towards those particular priority areas.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Okay, Lucy, right. Yeah, okay, sure.
It's just a further comment on the publicity of and working with businesses. It just struck me in the report that we've just had on travel and trading standards and food safety that we've got a cohort of our staff who are there interacting with small businesses, and I don't know whether we are utilising those interactions to be able to publicise things like decarbonise, which was mentioned again in passing in this report, and again these other innovation things, because if not, then that's something else that we need to join up on.
Rachel, thank you.
It's a really, really good point, and some of the work we're trying to do across the organisation is to understand that sense of how do we get the best use out of our resources to maximise outputs and outcomes for our city. So if officers going out and doing one thing but doing 4 more things while they're there, trying to raise profile is really positive. We use Marketing Derby, they're a really good network to businesses across the city, and the suggestion about involving ward members in knowing about that, so you can talk about your own interactions, will also be really, really positive. Anything we can do to try and maximise take-up, we'd be interested in doing that. So thank you for those suggestions.
Thank you very much, Rachel. Okay. If there's no more questions or comments, observations, I'd like to thank you for attending the meeting. It's now 6 o'clock, so we've got through a lot of business, and have a good evening. Thank you.